time to hear about what our wicked problem solvers actually discussed in our session. So we're going to go group by group and talk about what has transpired so far. And we're going to start with our amazing group number one. Back to my list here, Invasion of the Degree Snatchers.
So I guess we're stuck going one first because we're number one.
That's right.
I don't know if anybody else from the group is here. I'm inviting them up. Otherwise, I'm going to clumsily summarize what we did. Let's see here. All right. Well, I'll get to it. If any of the teams out there, please contribute. So we were talking about what I would say is less a wicked problem, unless you consider your bathroom a wicked problem. It's just a mess. I don't even know where to start. There's so many things that need to be sorted out. So we spent the first part of our topic actually exploring what really the relationship and some of the issues around badging, micro-credentials, alternative credentials, non-credit credentials, skill-based credentials, degrees, the whole works, and just kind of this complexity. And through this, we came to some topics that I think were of interest. I mean, there was certainly the question of the value of the credential, just like what are these different things worth? I mean, who values them? And there's really kind of two branches on that. I mean, certainly one sense the credential is valuable to a future employer to prove that someone can do something. But we also think there's a very important thread that the credential is valuable to the student by way of signaling progress or learning, as well as helping them get a job. We recognize that there's a big problem around what I'm going to call taxonomy. There's probably other things, but it's just the question of how does this stuff fit together? I mean, you can get all the badges in the world. It may be difficult to accumulate them into anything else that might look like a credential, certainly not a degree. But we don't see that there's a real natural reason for that. And but we recognize that there's just not good language around it. And that goes all the way up to the traditional transcript, which is really high level and doesn't really ever represent the skills that go with that. We also notice that there's a big disconnect between what higher education likes to think of what it does and what industry thinks that it might want. And we're not putting blame on either side, but there's definitely a communication problem between the purpose of the university and the needs of industry. The one other thing that I think was really important that we did dip into was the questions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as we think about atomizing the curriculum further, creating multiple personalized curricular paths, we did recognize that that could create additional confusion and it could create barriers to learning for some classes of students. We also recognize to the extent that things like badges are very technology-based, it could also be yet another barrier. So we're trying to be really thoughtful about that. So that was kind of our exploration of the problem space, and we came to kind of a general grouping of some of the players. There's definitely, what does the university get out of this? What does industry get out of this? To a certain degree, what do micro-credentialing organizations get out of it? But most important, we thought, was what do the students get out of this? And we wrapped up our session by proposing a series of questions that we will start to work on answering tomorrow. And the questions really range from what can we do about this messy taxonomy? How can we get students invested in their own kind of collection of learning? How do we move faculty forward? How do we address questions of diversity, equity, and inclusion? So those questions then will form the conversation for tomorrow. So I think we turned I'm going to call it the nasty problem of micro-credentials into at least a plan of attack. We may only get the proverbial toilet cleaned in the time that we have, but it's a start, and I think it's an important start. Okay. Anyone else from my group? Our group, the group. I knew I was going to get stuck with this, so I took notes.
I'm here, David. I think you covered everything.
Okay. That's all I needed to hear. Just a little self-affirmation. Cool. Did I do it right? I have to go first. I have no idea what's going to happen next.
I would say you set the precedent is what we'll say. You set
should
the bar.
Should I turn my lights back on? My alarm lights?
Don't
be alarmed.
Sorry.
Well, I don't want to raise the bar too high because I know Tom's got to go next and I don't want him to feel sad.
That's right. And that's right. And I think that's our cue. I'm going to invite back up Tom, Allie, and Lisa, who have been Frankensteining tools into strategy with their working group, whether it's those three or some other combination of people that have been working with the Frankenstein group. Now is your chance to report out on what you saw as a design path forward for how to take advantage of the tools and technologies that are out there and make the learning experience that much greater. And it appears that there has been a mustache that has sprung up in a couple hours. I mean, I've heard of a 5 o'clock shadow or a 3 o'clock shadow, but I don't know about a 12:56 o'clock shadow. Tom, enlighten us. Tell us a little bit about what's been happening in your working session.
No. This is not Tom. This is President Arcos of Indefatigable University. We have convened a working group to address the wicked problem of our declining enrollment in Southern Arizona. And we posited a couple of problems that are specific to our institution, one of which is that our traditional student body is declining due to demographics and other factors. And in order to address this, we determined that it was necessary to extend our reach beyond what we consider to be traditional students, as well as geographically, so that we can attract a broader range of students who may not be able to attend our wonderful institution on the hill in person for those special experiments that we like to run on them. In any case, our group worked carefully on a Google Doc, and we came up with a number of strategies to try to attract new students moving forward. First of all, we determined that we might want to establish a set of competency-based programs in order to attract students maybe in a mid-career environment where they might think, oh, well, this is all theory crap. I need something I can actually use in my real job. Secondly, increase the accessibility of our programs to people who may have technological challenges or other kinds of distance-based challenges. And thirdly, enhance and I know our the team member Chelsea said this isn't really a strategy, but she's right to a certain degree, but enhance and diversify our communities of learning so that we can attract students from non-traditional and from our non-traditional sectors. So targeted marketing to older individuals, certificate programs. So with this in mind, we went to our toolboxes and using a set of criteria that informs good teaching as well as attraction to communities of learning, we broke down these tools into 7 different areas. First of all, there was acquisition. We considered figuring out ways to create study rooms to encourage students to work together, both virtually and in person. Obviously, how can we do this for distance students? How can we lower that fear base, develop that community? Secondly, inquiry. How do we foreground our support services for those students who may have additional challenges like tutoring? And also peer learning, and how do we foreground that and using technology to do that? How do we increase the reach of practical learning? And that one way to do that would be to bring the student into the field and make the field where the student is at that particular time. Maybe that's up somewhere at the other end of the state or the other end of the country or around the world. But then we got really creative and started talking about ways in which we can market the school using the students as assets. First of all, having them create their own media assets, student-run daycares, compensation for students to do these sorts of things. Discussion, we spent a considerable amount of time on this and bringing together lots of different conversations, both inside and outside the classroom. Using annotation tools, using Discord, using Slack, and other sorts of tools like that. Collaboration. How do we create tangible work products for those students? You know, projects like Domain of One's Own, project boards for students to sign up for real-world projects where we interface with employers who may be looking, say, an engineering firm who's trying to solve engineering problems and wants to leverage the talent of engineering students or creative ideas. Lastly, we want to make sure we stimulate curiosity, because without curiosity, first of all, the students won't come, and secondly, they won't come back. If they find that this is dull, dry, and annoying, it won't work for them. So one example that Allie, our erstwhile representative from Slack, put up on there was the Devil to Devil ASU program, using Slack as a community building social space even before the students start classes. Using LinkedIn to connect to mentor networks, maybe through alumni networks and actually make that an active university program. So we are confident if we put all these measures in place and apply creative tool sets to them, that we will be able to produce a massive increase in enrollment over the coming years. And with that, I will hand it off to the team members, anybody who wishes to speak up. I know that several of them had to leave us to deal with family issues and likewise. But if anybody else, please welcome to join us.
Nope. Thank you,
Thank you.
President.
Thank you, Tom. I have also joined you in Mustache Land.
Thank you to Lisa for showing.
There you go, Karina. Yeah. Mustache Unity.
I'm working
Very
on my
good.
soul patch.
Yeah. Thanks for supporting, Sam. Okay, up next we have our Quiet Place, talking about virtual learners, group number 3.
Thank you. So I can start us off, and then others can feel free again to jump in. We really kind of dug deep into conversation in our group. And one of the things we mostly focused on the engagement pieces. And one of my biggest takeaways was something that team member Denise said at one point about engagement is not just hands-on, but it's more about the minds-on. And we all just sort of like mind blown when she said that, and thinking, you know, how often do we substitute the idea that because we're using a tool that is designed for engagement, that we are in fact engaging students, when we don't know if we have, how well have we really aligned that tool to meet the outcomes, both in terms of a learning outcome and what is the sort of personal outcome or group outcome that we want the students to walk away with. We talked a bit about, let me just scroll down my notes here. Some of the things that the last group discussed as well about how do we get our students to, do they need to connect even before class begins? And the sort of circular problem of, if we tell them to connect, it's no longer an organic connection. And what we noticed was that those organic connections yielded the most student engagement when students got together, chose a platform, and came together. On the other hand, when that happened, could that be setting up a place that is unintentionally exclusive? Because there isn't anybody sort of making sure that everybody has access to the same tool, and what's the privacy and security concerns around that tool, and what about people who are like, I cannot do one more tool. So we really didn't come away with any this is the way to solve it, but really enjoyed getting to just talk openly and honestly about the need to be more authentic in our virtual spaces and bring more authenticity to what engagement is, and to focus on engagement for the purpose of transferable skills, not just this is how you do this class. So those were some of our big pieces, and I will open it up if anybody else would like to add. Megan said in the chat, she said, we're definitely going to change the world by the end of tomorrow. +1 to that, Megan, for sure.
Don't worry about it. It's going to be cool, especially if y'all come with us. It's going to work out. I think the only thing that I wanted to add, that was such a phenomenal recap, and I really appreciate you doing that. Excellent note taking and active listening, obviously. But I think that the one thing that really popped out at me was the word kept coming up, multimodal. How do we really engage folks across in different ways? Because we're in a situation where you've got different learning styles, different ways of being, different levels of prior knowledge, like all of these things that are really differentiated. And how do we create a system that is multimodal to meet people where they are without overloading either instructors or learners with tools? Because who needs more tools? I do.
Yeah, I want to agree. Janet did a really great job hitting the highlights of our discussion. There's only other one thing that I wanted to add was actually from Megan. And she had brought up the fact that, what traditionally looks like engagement is not necessarily, it's not accessible or equitable. And so just being cognizant of the decisions that we make when we are, either requiring something or including it in the classroom, and how that works across for all of our students.
Fantastic. Go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
Oh, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I have to say, having caught some of your group's conversation this morning, I could tell the magic was unfolding. And I appreciate the earnestness in which you also, are discussing this challenge. And I really look forward to seeing how it all unfolds tomorrow. So thank you for the energy, and thank you for the excellent recap. And I'm going to roll it over back to Brent now, and his his Chris and team as they talk about silence of the students.
Except it's only, I think it's only me, and I do not have share screen. You're going to give me share screen, please? Because I do now, because you all thought that the magic was over. Sorry, Tim. Here we are at ShapingEDU conference, and we had, our group was the silence of the students. We need to prioritize voice plus choice for lifelong learning. And we got joined by Mirror Mirror, engaging positive mental health and wellness and practices to become Mirror Mirror on the wall whose voice is not being heard at all. Dial S for success, voice plus choice plus community building for lifelong learning. It's the perfect title to any educational academic paper with lots of pluses, quotation marks, and multiple hyphens. And with that, so we did actually join together with this other group. And what we came up with, of course, is that new name, which Stephanie did not know that we changed it on her again. But what wicked problem we really want to address can really be summed up by a quote by Maggie Kuhn, which is, speak your mind even when your voice shakes. So we're looking at breaking the systemic power differential between students and faculty and institutions about speaking up, self-determination, and embracing that everyone comes to the table with a different hats, as we've been all wearing different hats, conquistador, and histories and experiences, and the need to create empowerment around speaking up about mental health and wellness. So what we're going to try to create, we actually came up with a few things. We're going to do this voice and choice ecosystem. So we want to do a break the silence, a toolbox for greater communication. And we're thinking that it could be acknowledging or empowering varying needs of students, faculty, and the institutions. Toolbox could be deployed as a resource in our courses and syllabi for student services, advising practices, institutional culture, policies, and practices. We can have mindfulness and wellness components to it, and also components for training for allyship and skills. The next thing we wanted to look at was a program for practices for policy for students, faculty, and institutions. So what is that going to look like? They would acknowledge and leverage frameworks for building concepts and skills and empowerment, self-determination, advocacy, sensitivity, and allyship. They could also maybe be open spaces for a voice to surface in meaningful ways and lead to empowerment of choice after whether or not voices surfaced or heard. And then we could also reduce the burden and empower individuals while pushing institutions to evolve and create a culture or climate of inclusion, belonging, trust, and mutual respect. And then the other idea, which I'm going to credit to Stephanie, was a human library event, right? Where everyone gets a chance to kind of tell their story, from my understanding. And we want to really focus on student voices, because a lot of times students don't want to break that barrier. So we want to give them a space, and we really want to try to find a way to bring in the voices that really need to be heard, because usually the voices that show up are the ones that don't necessarily need that extra support, right? It's the ones that are still staying behind. So those are the three things that we thought about that we could do. And then, we're still confused though, right? There's lots of stuff going on. It's like, how might we balance self-determination with inclusion and cultural sensitivity? How can institutions build these frameworks that allow students to thrive no matter how they wield their voice? How might we address the individual vector and the institutional systemic vector of the problem? It's really a systemic issue that we're looking at here between not having that voice heard and students having choice. Does a potential solution have to hit all layers at the same time or sequentially? What does it look like? And then how do we break the barrier that students do not know what to do when faculty themselves share, right, about what's going on for them, right? To try to create that human factor that we are all in this together. So often, especially in the past 18 months with the pandemic, students wanted us to support them, but they forgot that we need support too, because we're going through the same pandemic as they are, right? And we want to make sure that it doesn't come back and bite the faculty, right? Be from the student point of view, or maybe even from an administrative point of view. So if that's something that you're interested in, please come join us tomorrow, and we'll look into the mirror and find out where we will go next.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brent. Okay, moving on to group 5, 365 plus days later, talking about the post-pandemic best practices, whenever that may be. Group number 5, what do we have from you today?
Chris and Jody are going to read a press release that we have prepared for the group. And so I will begin with, history is gossip well written. We want to write and visualize the history of the experience of current and prospective members of our diverse community through these stories. We propose to work towards this goal by meeting on a regular basis and having a central accomplishment come out of each meeting. Our proposed product is something involving the gathering and sharing of stories to foster positive transformations in the communities that we serve.
We envision a network of stories, including a visual representation of connections among the micro stories. We plan to include diverse voices that represent successful solutions and best practices. We will continuously and actively seek stories to keep adding to our database. We are results oriented, so we want to produce useful, engaging resources. Immediate potential products that come to mind are resources offered by ShapingEDU, including a project page, blog posts, webinars sharing pandemic success stories and the failures that created them, a speakers collective of people who are available for conference presentations and other gatherings to share or promote best practices in learning coming out of the pandemic. Resource lists, videos of stories. Those will be in various places, including the ShapingEDU site, social media, and so on. Connecting our stories to library archives, and more ideas to come tomorrow.
We are the storytellers, which involves telling our stories and collecting stories to be shared from and by others. We want to expand the range of voices currently heard. By collecting and documenting these stories, we can look for potential black swans and be proactive in developing skills needed to respond effectively when the black swans that are landing in our pond, to create anti-fragile organizations. We want to foster anti-fragility by keeping successes and also learning from the less successful approaches we have seen, turning short-term failures into long-term successes. There is more to come tomorrow, and that is our press release for today. Thank you.
That was fantastic. So I work on the creative and communications team at the University Technology office. Y'all are hired. That's a way better press release than, you know, what kinds of press releases are usually out there in the world. So I would say send to press. Really excited to see the progress that's unfolded in your group, and really look forward to seeing how it unfolds tomorrow. Thank you so very much. This means this means we're ready to move on to group number 6, the shining of the spotlight on DEI and education. And so who would like to represent that group right now?
I believe I will.
Awesome.
Hold on. I need to
I
get the spotlight.
Barnaby.
I need to get the spotlight out of the way.
Ooh.
There we go. Gosh darn it. There we go. There, that's better. In honor of a Booker, I thought I'd grow a 5 o'clock shadow as well. So what our major efforts were to look at how could we address and help design an actionable output on DIB, diversity, equity, and inclusion within education. And we started unpacking the nut of how could we establish a more inclusive environment that promoted engagement, retention, and success for online students across community colleges and higher education, not just some of what we've been doing with Arizona State, but across within kind of an open standard. And what would that look like? How could we create a sense of value for online learners in realizing and successfully engaging through their learning experience with online success coaches? So that was the large nut that we're looking at. And what we were trying to do and create is reaching students who don't normally reach out to a success coach. They may not realize what they could do for them and how they could be further empowered in dealing with the mysteries of life. And so that's one, looking at bridging the importance of community and of belonging, increasing a sense of value in having a success coach, in building those relationships of belonging. And as an African proverb helps remind us, if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And so we're looking at building a campaign, a community campaign, or experience map, or possibly a program that's informed from that. There's questions around the audiences that we're reaching. Is it just the students? Is it their families? Is it the faculty members and support staff that are all part of that larger integrated community? What tension areas exist within those communities that we can very much shine a spot? Well, I won't say that word because I will be blinded once more. What can we do as instructors, as success coaches, to work on projects together? What affinity groups exist within each of our environments, learning environments, that can help build and expand on this, and what student groups can provide insights to this work. That said, and I am so sorry, Paul, but I feel that there's a very strong alignment in the work that the prior group that was looking at that was looking at voice and choice. So it might not just be the, the Brett show alone, but it feels like there is an intersectional alignment and opportunity here. Could there be room in this work for 3? Don't know that yet. Stay tuned. Connect with us tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Barnaby, for jumping in there. We're going to now talk about, let me put my Freddy Krueger hat on. Here we go. We're going to talk about Nightmare on Accessibility Street. Do we have someone from group 7?
Hi, hello. I am Nicole, and I will be reporting out for Nightmare on Accessibility Street, where we're thinking about creating a space and place for all online. I volunteered to speak for our group, but we had a very robust discussion and participation. So I wanted to really thank and acknowledge our facilitators, Kathy, Adero, Michael, and Anne, as well as my fellow participants, Norma Jean, Lindsay, and Sharon, and say that these are kind of our shared ideas. So I'm hoping that I kind of get this right. I'm reading basically from a Google Doc to make sure that I try to say this the right way. So some first level ideas we had are an AR experience. So administrators may experience the impacts of specific disabilities, as well as a competition based on solving disability related barriers, maybe year-long for students to compete and develop solutions. But as we were talking about that, we realized that we were kind of looking at both macro and micro goals. So we came up with a couple of potential first level solutions for that. Macro being a consortium of the universities to pressure publishers to develop accessible materials. And some micro goals. We had 3: asking about accessibility in each planning session or project we are a part of, identifying faculty allies and working with them to share accessibility tips and tools with their colleagues. And of course, our favorite, I think, for the day is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we want to make sure that we are keeping accessibility in the conversation. So if we're thinking about the question, which piece of this wicked problem are we going to address? Because of course it's a huge problem. We kind of looked at this twofold. First, oh, baby on my lap. So if you hear noises, that's that. Okay, so first, awareness and influence of the importance of accessibility is one part. And then the second part is, how might I, as a staff member or faculty or administrator or student, how might I influence a shift in mindset around my influence around accessibility? Specifically, how could we influence other faculty members and incorporate accessibility into instructions and rubrics? How could we support faculty and administrators in final details? And how could we truly include other learners and accessibility in diversity, equity, and inclusive efforts? Next, what are we trying to do or create? We acknowledge this is a huge problem. We're working still to define it a little bit better, but we're thinking we want to create some tools to use now so that we can address the bigger problems later. So the specific thing we are currently thinking about is creating a roadmap to assist individuals with influence and awareness. So you could be staff, faculty, administrator, student. How would you move forward? Because we recognize there are some outstanding questions, confusions, and things that continue to exist. 2 of those. First, if so many resources already exist for accessibility, why are we not using them to solve the problem? Hence a roadmap. And second, how could we use the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts as a platform to include other learners? So that's our doc, and I will of course invite anybody else from our group to maybe share in the chat or out loud. Otherwise, thank you, and looking forward to continue this tomorrow and invite anybody else to join us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, Sam, since we merged groups 8 and 4, would you like to introduce group 9?
I'd love to. And thank you so much, Nicole, for representing DEI. That was fantastic. And baby on lap and everything. I have to say, since we're having such frank and authentic conversations about education and the whole experience today, just like the difference between this year and 2 years ago, I would have made all kinds of plans to ensure that you know, my husband had picked up my daughter and that everything was out of the way and I had total quiet in the office. And I think one thing in terms of resilience and anti-fragility that the pandemic has potentially sparked within, especially parents of young children or parents who were homeschooling even older children, is that sense that the show will always go on and that we are all humans first. We think about, you know, what humanizing learning means. It means accepting all of us as humans with wherever we're coming from and with whatever is going on in our lives. And so I'm so happy to officially say, if there was like a stamp, like a certified sustainable event, if we could have a certified all babies and pets welcome at the Shaping EDU series, I would totally move that, so that regardless of what people are working on and where they are in the world with their backgrounds, that they could feel comfortable participating. So thanks for setting a great example for us, Nicole. So last but certainly not least, since as Stephanie mentioned, and I'm so sorry, Stephanie, I can't take you seriously in those, what was that, C3PO glasses?
These are my virtual reality goggles.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so you're clearly gearing up for our next working session, all about Brain Scan 2021 and XR and deep fakes. So let's invite our final group up to the virtual stage to share a little bit of their findings from today.
Okay, everybody. Stephanie is there with her virtual goggles on, and I'm just woofing down lunch in the real world here. It's life, you know, between things. But anyway, Stephanie will remind me of the virtual side. Let me pull up my notes. I think I was nominated to do the, I guess we call it a brain scan summary, at least where we are right now. And I'll give you where we are. And I know a few members of the group are here in the mix today. And if they want to jump in at any point or at the end, please do, because I'm sure my notes do not cover everything. They're only going to get at some of this. So we decided, first of all, that we don't solve wicked problems. We just tame them. Wicked problems never get solved because they just keep rearing their heads again and again. So it's like the lion and the whip. You try to get the lion to lay down for a while, but you don't turn your back on it because it could always resurface one more time. These are not easily solvable problems because we're thinking of something, particularly when it comes to XR, that is in many ways 5 to 10 years out, a world where virtual experiences are ubiquitous, where we might not even use something like Zoom in the future, but that we would all be in a collaborative shared space with our avatars. So we have profound challenges ahead of us. And we had a wide-ranging discussion on XR, from the nuts and bolts of individual experiences to high-level issues on the impact of VR on education and society. The ethical issues here are fascinating, as you all know, and if you're a part of the discussion and not, join us tomorrow to hear a little bit more about this. We talked a lot about how do VR experiences affect people in their real lives. This, of course, has already been an issue in the game industry, and there's been a long debate in society about this. Do games, violent games, for example, impact behavior in real life? But VR is different than games because VR is not on a screen. VR is actually, as Maya had said earlier on in our introduction, VR is an experience, a human experience. So we have to really think about that. What are the moral boundaries in virtual reality? Do they parallel what we have or what we want to have in real life? Does that ultimately matter? Can we just let it go and say anything can happen in VR, but not necessarily in real life? So these were all things that we went back and forth on and spent a lot of time discussing. In terms of outcomes, we're still working on it. We don't have a press release. We don't have a video yet. We don't have a plan, but we're on the verge of getting one. So you got to come back tomorrow. And if you're looking for something to do, roll up your sleeves and join us, because we can always use the help. But we considered doing some kind of overarching framework that might help faculty and others transition to a world where virtual experiences are ubiquitous. We know so well, we all know this when you talk about the future, that dystopian ideas are always compelling. For some reason, human beings just gravitate toward the dystopian side of things. But what we're looking for is not the dystopian side and not the Pollyanna side, but something that encompasses both. Yeah, we do have to know the challenges. We do have to know where the whirlpools are, but we also have to know where we can do good with this, where things can happen that are that's incredibly positive. So some of the examples that we looked at, and by the way, we said we need to move fast on this. We need to move a lot faster than where we are right now. When one of our participants, he put it really well. He said, it's like the scene in the Indiana Jones movie where the rock is rolling down right behind him. That's where we are with VR, okay? It's coming right behind us and we don't realize it. And if we don't run really fast, we're gonna be squished by it. So we need to get a handle on all of this stuff. But some of the examples we looked at is what's being done in the gaming industry. I think one of the failures of education today is the lack of collaborative alliances. Maybe ShapingEDU is something of an exception to that, but we don't really have that. And the gaming industry has actually faced up to some of these issues, and in both the Fair Play Alliance and in Playing for the Planet, which is a more nonprofit one, both of those have tackled sharing best practices, encouraging healthy communities and healthy player interactions in online gaming. And of course, Playing for the Planet has worked on getting people to make ambitious, specific, and time-based commitments for both people and the planet. So that's what we'd like to see, is some kind of overarching umbrella, overarching framework that could cover all of that. That, my friends, we're going to do tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, depending on your time zone. We didn't get to that yet. We got to the stages of that and said, we got to stop. We're already past time. So we want something that's research-based. We want something that's evocative. We want something that's achievable, but we want something that doesn't just ask the question, what if, but the question, why not, and take the steps, the concrete steps that we need to do to bring stakeholders together to realize a collective vision. And that, my friends, is where we are at this moment in time. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, Emery, and to all of our facilitators and all of the members who have jumped in. So this is an UnConference, right? And we knew that after the report outs and the groups had gotten together, there was going to be some natural overlap, some natural synergies. And I think a couple emerged early on with our new group, happening for Mirror Mirror and Silence of the Students merging. And so I want to give us a chance before our next segment with a little bit of time that we have for participants to weigh in, to make observations about what you saw here, what you heard here today, and even reflect upon and propose for tomorrow, potentially some new combined or streamlined paths forward for our working sessions. I think I heard a formal proposal come from Barnaby, and so I'll toss it over to you first and then open up the floor for just a brief discussion.
Yes, I think I'm on. It felt like we had, again, a natural alignment of efforts between what was being shared within Voices and Choices, because we were very much unpacking empowerment and looking at ways to bring greater visibility to opportunities that build belonging and inclusion. And that's what the Voice and Choice tangibly felt to us. So as we were hearing their update, this progress update, it was a natural. I mean, there was lots of excitement and buzz around that. And one of our key participants within our working session, I will call her out, Julie Hans, also spoke up and said, yes, let's do this. So from concept and challenge that we were wanting to see enacted, that's where our desire and our lean is. That said, we don't want to make the assumptions that we just jump in and say, I hope you ordered enough pizza, because I hope they did.
Well, does that sound so? Are you making a formal proposition to join the new group 4, the updated group 4? Is that?
Oh, I don't know the rule of engagement around this. Yes, we formally make a proposal to merge and join forces. today belonging, tomorrow the world.
Thank you, Pinky. So that was all sleight of hand and tricks, light tricks, just so you know, Barnaby, that was all sleight of hand. We are group 48, by the way. I changed our name. We are group 48. And I changed it on our Google Doc, just so you know. And I updated our name there to mirror on the wall, just to shorten it out. But we welcome everybody. So if you would like to join us, I will share our Google Doc with you in your Slack space, as well as our Jamboard, so you can add any materials that you want there, and you come over and join us.
Love it. And I propose that we consider 468, since everyone's work is great.
Well, we're going to see if you show up first, Barnaby.
That we should never doubt. You have free pizza, dude. We're there.
Well,
I don't know where you got that from.
That sounded
I
like
guess
a,
Rachel's bringing the pizza. She's our
that
student.
sounded like a slight, like a little slight. Okay, we see you, Brent. We'll see you tomorrow.
Well, this is what I really adore so much, because something that I've actually heard, if you interview, and I took some classes around grant writing and fundraising, and one of the kind of the biggest stumbles and observations made about grantors is sometimes they overlook existing smaller programs in favor of funding something just entirely new out of nowhere, when it actually turns out that the smaller groups could actually use the money and funding and support to scale their efforts or merge with like organizations and form a consortium. And so this actually models, I think, a wonderful real world approach to actually refining focus, joining forces, and making sure that there is a diversity of lenses represented. And to that point, I'll add, just to tease our student panel tomorrow, that's going to be our opening keynote. We had the students look at all the Wicked challenges, because they're going to be answering some of the same questions that you are. And one of the students actually noted, wow, I'm so glad that DEI is present, but it almost feels like a lens that needs to be added to every single one of these challenges. So I found it pretty uncanny and also pretty awesome that, a student recognized that right away. And so I was wondering how it would all play out today, but I think groups 4, 6, and 8, this is such a fantastic representation of real world collaboration and being agile and actually being anti-fragile and sharing resources and bringing brains together. So really good work.
And Sam, how amazing was it that we had our keynote this morning talking about DEI and looking at things through the DEI lens, and here we are following in the footsteps of our keynote panel and taking that into our working sessions today. I love it.
Love to see it. So we got that one out of the way. And any other observations, comments, questions, bits of feedback? It doesn't have to necessarily do with proposing a merge or something that formal or serious. We just would love to hear your feedback on how things have been going today and any observations that you want to share, any reflections.
Well, I put this in chat and I don't know how the rest of the group feels about it, but I heard a lot of the same themes that we talked about in group 2 coming through in group 3 presentation, and I see that on their Google Doc. So I'm really interested in where we could overlap there, especially with our plan that we made earlier today to talk more about near future digital tools for engagement. And maybe Tom could pick up there, but.
Awesome, Chelsea. Tom, did you have any builds to that? Okay, no worries. It's usually I don't expect silence from Tom, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Other observations or reflections? And no worries, if you are in a crowded space, you're welcome to also write any commentary. I see lots of comments flowing through in the chat. So I think if there's no further proposals or feedback or reflections to share, and yes, Kelly, these graphics will be available on the website and are being shared across Slack. So yes, you will be able to make sure that you get recordings of things like keynotes and all the beautiful artwork, to share for our work today.
Thank you so much, Karina. And if we're ready to wrap here, I can go ahead and talk about the future of Shaping EDU. If we can advance a couple of slides, we'll dive into that. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So those of you who want to join us in looking into our crystal ball and perhaps take out a deck of cards, here we go. Do a different deck of cards looking into the future here. So what do we have cooking for 2022? So just for those of you who weren't with us earlier, Sam, if you could just give us a quick snapshot of what Shaping EDU is, I'll take it from there and we'll talk about the future.
Yes, so just picking up on the thread from earlier, what we know that we are, or hope that we are, which is a community of innovation in action, coming up with action plans and setting them into motion. And we are all change makers. Some of us are educators, students, researchers, storytellers, ed tech creators, and futurists, or all of the above, right? These things are not mutually exclusive, which is what I love about the Shaping EDU community. Of course, we put together events like this one, but it's not just about the experience at the event, it's afterwards. So we'd love to take your perspectives, your ideas, and work with you to build upon them and turn them into tangibles that can support the broader education community year round. And this can take the form of toolkits, white papers, frameworks, further workshops. It's really not about the format, it's the media must fit the message. And we are getting a lot of great messages here loud and clear today. Thanks, Stephanie.
You bet. So we can go to the next slide, please. So we talked about yesterday a little bit about actions and a little bit this morning about actions. And I think it's important to understand what's really driving the community. So after the 2018 event, the first community event, we actually created 10 actions. And with those 10 actions, we went into 2019, modified them a little bit. And what we plan to do moving forward after this UnConference is, again, revisit what are the 10 most critical things that we need to be addressing and formulate calls to action around that. Next slide, please. So the 10 actions guide us, right? So we want to make sure that each action is representative of a neighborhood in the global higher ed community that collectively drives innovation to improve student success, collaboration, leadership, next-gen learning environments, and digital fluency. So everything that we do, all the content we create, all the events that we produce are really meant to be guided by these actions. So as I mentioned, after this event and things that transpire here, and as we all come back together and understand what our takeaways are from this event, we'll revisit it, what our actions are, and our goal is to boil those down into 5 calls to action so we can really be focused and bring all of the right people around the table to make some amazing things happen. So what happens after this? So once we create our actions, we need a plan and we need a team. So we'll bring our community leaders together. So we have our in-house team. We have our groundbreakers, which are our thought leaders and help us navigate through projects and help make things happen within the community. And we have our lifelong change leaders who are advisors, not as actively involved as our groundbreakers, but giving us insights and sharing their wisdom with us. We also have ambassadors, which are evangelists for the program and for our community, out in the world, making sure that people know that what we're up to and how they can participate. So if you're looking to become part of the Shaping EDU community leadership, these are some of the roles that you could potentially take on. We also have some amazing partners and are always looking for different partners as well, nonprofits, associations, education consultants. And then on the sponsor front, as you've seen from all of our co-conveners that have been helping make this week possible, we have ed tech creators, and we have some amazing collaborators that are such good partners for us to really help advance some of our mission. Next slide, please. So output projects, we've talked a little bit about, and I know in our group, our working session, we talked a lot about project outputs. So this is where we move our knowledge into practice. So this is the cycle that we're going to embrace moving forward. So in February, we're going to move the UnConference to February, and that will be on an annual basis. That will be happening. We're hoping next year that we can see you in person, but we're being safe and cautious and making sure that everyone is able to join in the most safe way possible. So from the UnConference, we'll focus on wrapping up completed projects. We'll talk about new projects. That'll be a big focus of what we're doing in the UnConference. So from there, we move into project work. We then move into creating a charter, creating a pitch, coming back together, grabbing everyone who wants to be involved, formulating a team, then continuing the work. Then we'll have our global virtual summer camp, formerly known as Learning Human. And we'll be doing that in July, bringing the global community together again to discuss important findings and really doing a landscape survey of what's going on in education and technology. Continue with the project work, and then we go into a field report in October. We'll have a video from the project team talking about what they've accomplished, continue with their project work, and then that next February, we'll come back to UnConference and talk about either wrapping that project up or pivoting it in a significant way. And off we go into another year cycle. Next slide, please. So the events, this is part of what you're involved in today. So this is we're coming together to reshape problems, and we want to continue to do that. So February 22 is when we'll see you next at an UnConference event. Again, this is an invitation-only community gathering, and we're really looking at addressing challenges. So again, we're focusing on the results of actionable outputs, ideas, recommendations, concrete products. That's really, again, about not just discussing what's going on in the world, but really trying to come up with some resolutions to some of the challenges that are facing the community. We'll have our global virtual summer camp in July. So looking at hands-on learning, storytelling, tech hacks, and some good old-fashioned shenanigans like you've seen here this week as well. So really, again, with the summer camp, we're talking about environmental scanning, sharing new concepts and best practices, just enhancing the knowledge base of the community as a whole. And then moving on, we'll have our change makers gather. So these are the folks that are kind of our community leaders behind the scenes. After our big events, we'll bring them together. And again, if you want to be a part of this, please reach out to Sam or I about joining the community, and we'll talk about what a good role may be for you. So here we go. After the big events, we come back together, talk about what we learned, and figure out what the next steps look like to resolve some of the challenges that are facing the community. Next, please. We'll have our Launchpad event, which we touched on earlier, which is after we have an UnConference, we'll make project charters. We'll actually bring everyone together to talk about what those projects are going to be, kind of rally the troops there, get the right people around the table to help you make these things happen. And those teams will then engage in project work. So this is the opportunity for potential sponsors and partners to talk about how they can assist us in making these things happen as well. And intersections is a new concept that we've talked quite a bit about intersections today, and we've discovered a few of them along the way. But one of the key things here is talking to other sectors about how we can assist them, and they can teach us things as well, how we can move different initiatives forward. So this could be museums, libraries, music schools, art schools, the UNESCO initiatives around the 17 key sustainability initiatives that are meant to be accomplished. And here we are in the middle of the decade of action. Those are meant to be accomplished in 2030. So what are their challenges? How can we help them? What can we learn from what they have to bring to the table? Next, please. And then here we have our, what we're tentatively calling our North Star event. So these would be every other year, really looking at curating a group of about 100 people, bringing them to an amazing location and having everyone talk about what the future holds. So we're really looking for top education futurists to help us shape the future. Next, please. So some programs, we've really focused on events quite a bit in the past, and we're doing that now, and we want to expand on that concept and develop some programs for education innovators. So our first one is called Blueprints. This is actually a DEI focused Zoom event that would happen twice a year, looking at spotlighting educational initiatives serving a unique lifelong learning community. We can look at that through the lens of dyslexia, autism, refugee programs, Native American programs, lots to explore in this realm. So we would have 30 minutes of pre-recorded content and then have a 30-minute panel discussion. So we're excited about that. I have a lot of enthusiasm around this concept. Next, please. The next we're calling Passport. So we're looking at the most innovative universities in the world, focusing on a couple of them through a theme, the thread that will run between all of the topics that we're talking about, and talking about what trails these other universities have blazed, and looking at hosting that with a current student of the program, a former student of the program, and talking about what an experience is like at that university. And then also touching on, what ASU as an innovation leader is doing to support initiatives such as those. Next, please. So this just gives you a quick peek at the calendar, lets you know what we have cooking, and we'll definitely keep you guys in the loop. If you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter so you can make sure to know of what's going on in Shaping EDU world, and definitely connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on socials, and make sure that we can gather you together and invite you to join us as we make amazing things happen. Next, please. So just to understand how all of these pieces fit together, dreaming, doing, and driving is what we're all about. So each program is driven by that particular notion that all of these things come together in a cyclical fashion, and these pieces all help move us forward. Excellent. So with that said, we're going to go back to our friend Tim to delight us.
Oh, so sorry, Stephanie, there's been quite a hubbub in the chat.
Oh, let's address the hubbub,
thank
please.
you for presenting. Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing the future and the vision. We're really excited to take that forward.
Oh, fantastic.
With you. And I'm just so happy Stephanie has joined us as our dedicated director. You can see from her presentation that there's a lot of thinking around how to actually pull this into tangibles, concrete experiences, and things to serve the community. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
And some of the other hubbub was related to Karina and her wonderful bit of art. Everyone has asked, or many have asked, that you please kind of show what you've created, and just take, I know Tim's raring to go too, but maybe just take a couple minutes to, from your viewpoint, kind of share your own findings.
Sure. Thanks so much. And thanks to those of you in the chat who are interested. So I would just love to echo what we've heard, that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I've heard that in pretty much every single conversation, whether it was floating or peeking in on your docs or in your presentations this afternoon, along with accessibility, and thinking about that in a variety of ways, whether it's accessibility to the tools and the connectivity, or accessibility in terms of different ways of leveraging tools to get to the content and information and abilities. So I think that another piece that I tend to really hear strongly in this group, this Shaping EDU community, is the whole human, the whole student, and the whole instructor. And thinking, especially this quote, speak your mind even when your voice shakes, just the compassion that I've heard in many of these presentations and conversations of, this can be hard. This year has been exceptional, and just really thinking about how we can center the learner, support each other, and learn together. I think just in a real nutshell, those are some of the highlights that I'm hearing, and I'm just super excited to continue listening in and drawing tomorrow. And these will be in Slack. I know they're going out in the email blasts, and they are for you to share and use. So thanks for your interest in the visual, the multimodal. Here we are, trying to dance our talk here.
Dance the talk. That's the next evolution of walking the walk. I love it. Thank you so much, Karina. And back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Karina. Everything you've done today, this week, and prior to that is just absolutely amazing and inspiring. And it is a real human behind that, doing it, not using software, but actually Karina making magic happen.